Hello and welcome to our first episode of Howl's Histories for the summer half term. I hope you're all keeping safe. Today's episode is all about the wars in Afghanistan, Syria and Iraq in perspective. Now the wars there loom large in the history of our times, but it can often seem incomprehensible to understand what is being fought over, why, and by whom. So I shall start by looking at the war in Afghanistan. But to understand the war in Afghanistan, then you've first got to understand the situation in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is an ethnically divided country held together by Islam, cricket, the army, and a fear of its more powerful neighbour, India. Now, for a decade, it has been in a state of civil war, or at least at times near civil war. It is also regularly fought with its neighbour, India, and so it's fought wars against India in 1947, 1984, in what's known as the Siachen Glacier, which was fought at 22,000 feet above sea level, probably the highest battlefield in human history. Again in 1985, in 1987, in 1995, and in 1999 over Kashmir, and they came close to blows in 2001. Now both India and Pakistan want the province of Kashmir. India wants it so it has a link to Afghanistan and a window to Central Asia, and to separate Pakistan from China. Both Pakistan and China are becoming increasingly close, and China is investing heavily in Pakistan's economy and military, and that threatens to encircle India by hostile military powers. Pakistan wants Kashmir to help it secure its water supplies. The River Indus goes through Indian-controlled Kashmir, and the River Indus provides 2/3 of Pakistan's water. Global warming is increasingly disrupting the supply of water in the River Indus, and the population of this area, and hence demand for water, is rising. Both countries need the water, and we've already seen wars fought for water, and we're going to see wars fought increasingly for water in the future. In fact, we're more likely to fight wars for water than for oil in the future. Pakistan also wants to control Kashmir to keep its vital link with China. And so both India and Pakistan are very keen to control Kashmir. War between India and Pakistan over Kashmir, or Pakistan's efforts to destabilise India, are a constant possibility. Both India and Pakistan, as we speak, are fighting a proxy war in Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan is very important to Pakistan. Pakistan lacks what we call strategic depth. I mean, it's a big country compared to Britain, but militarily not so. It lacks the size to be able to fight a widespread war of manoeuvre. Now, Pakistan has an army of around 500,000 men, but that faces an Indian army of around 1,000,000 men. The north of Pakistan has the far desert and mountains, and in the south the ground is quite swampy, and so both north and south suit the defender. But crucially, in the centre of Pakistan, the Punjab, which has Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, in it, it's flat, ideal tank country. Also, it only needs really the Indian army to advance 250 miles to capture Islamabad. The Indian army could be in Islamabad in the outbreak of war within a couple of days. And so Pakistan has a number of plans to try and stop this. Firstly, any war between Pakistan and India that doesn't instantly go nuclear is likely to open with a massive attack by the Pakistan army through the centre. The idea that they could drive into India, cut what's known as Highway 1A, and knock the Indian army out of supply. No matter how big the army, if they don't have fuel, water, food and ammunition, then they're no good. Cut the Indian army out of supply, destroy it, and win the war. If they fail to cut the highway, however, then they're likely to face annihilation on those open tank planes, and so then they'll have little choice but to retreat, abandon Islamabad, and retreat into Afghanistan and fight on from what effectively will be a war in exile. And so Pakistan needs a friendly Afghan government to give them the room to do so. Which is why India, of course, is so interested in Afghanistan, because India knows that they need to drive a wedge between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And this brings us to Afghanistan itself. Now, the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan is a British invention. It's known as the Durand Line, that was drawn in 1893. The Pashtun people live on both sides of the border, and they are the majority in much of Afghanistan and what the old British province of the northwest frontier in what is now Pakistan, which includes the area around the Khyber Pass. And so in 1979, the USSR invaded Afghanistan. India supported the USSR, whereas Pakistan, the Americans, and Saudi Arabia supported the Afghans as part of the Cold War. When the USSR withdrew from Afghanistan, the ISI, the Pakistan Military Intelligence Unit, supported and possibly created the Afghan Taliban, a Pashtun-dominated group seeking to control Afghanistan. The Pakistan city of Peshawar sends fighters, weapons, and equipment, as well as a large amount of cash, to the Taliban from the Pakistan government. And so the Pakistan government uses the city of Peshawar to flood Afghanistan with military resources. Now, in 2001, the Taliban had been hosting Al-Qaeda for many years. It struck at the US in an operation that had been planned in Afghanistan. Now, this was Al-Qaeda, not the Taliban, it has to be remembered. Now, the Taliban couldn't just hand over Al-Qaeda to the Americans, as much as they probably wanted to, because of to the Pashtun people. Culturally, the idea of honouring and protecting a guest is a very important part of their culture. They couldn't therefore just hand a guest over to the Americans for execution. Culturally, it would be unthinkable for them. Now, the American Secretary of State at the time, Colin Powell, he forced the Pakistan President, Musharraf, to leave a meeting and told him that he was either with the US or against them. I mean, it was an incredibly rude way of treating and demeaning way of treating a head of state. He was told that that Musharraf was busy and he just didn't care. Get him out of the meeting. The US also told the ISI, remember the Pakistan Military Intelligence, that if they refused to cooperate with the campaign against the Taliban for their failure to hand over Al-Qaeda, then they would bomb them back to the Stone Age. Now, from 2001 to 2004, the Americans drove the Taliban out of power nationally in Afghanistan in alliance with the Afghan Northern Alliance. Pakistan sort of cooperated with the Americans. They banned several Taliban groups and privately accepted American drone strikes in Pakistan itself while publicly protesting against this terrible breach of sovereignty. Now, it was incredibly tough for the Pakistan government, as they were being asked to turn on their friends, an organisation that they possibly had even created themselves, and people they'd certainly trained in the 1990s. The Taliban were absolutely furious with what they saw as the treachery of the Pakistan government, although Pakistan had very little option other than out-and-out war with America, which of course they could not possibly win or afford. And so the Taliban were furious and seized control of much of the Pashtun areas of northern Pakistan. There were 3 failed assassination attempts against Musharraf, and they killed his would-be successor, Bhutto. So far, over 50,000 Pakistan civilians have been killed in this civil war. Al-Qaeda were scattered, but not the Taliban. As an Afghan told an American soldier, "You have the watches, but we have the time."